What's up, guys? It is Mike from Mana Hoarders. The title of this video is Theros, the Old Gods and the New. If you couldn't figure that out from the title, we're going to be comparing the old versions of the gods from the original Theros to their newer versions from the recently released Theros Beyond Death. First up, let's take a look at Athreos. The original Athreos God of Passage is a 3-mana 5/4. He is indestructible as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7. It's not a creature. Whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. Versus Athreos Shroud Veiled. The newest version is a 6-drop. It is a 4/7 indestructible. The devotion is the same. His ability, at the beginning of your end step, put a coin counter on another target creature. Also, whenever a creature with a coin counter on it dies or is put into exile, return that card to the battlefield under your control. So let's compare apples to apples. With the original, you are obviously going to want to rely on an aristocrat style build or something that is focused on sacrificing your creatures to gain value. This is going to make you target an opponent, and then they will either be able to decide whether they're going to pay 3 life to keep those in the graveyard or have it go back to your hand. Now with the new version, I do like how it is not predicated on the decision of an opponent. You are going to be putting coin counters at your end step, and then whenever the creature dies or is put into exile, which is very key here, you're going to gain control of it. Now you can put the coin counter on any creature except Athreos Shroud Veiled. So if an opponent has a very powerful creature that you want, you can put the coin counter on it, and then, following a board wipe, or if you will have, plenty of target removal, either in destroy effects or exile in this build, you'll be able to take control of it. Now, the only thing I would note in the new Athreos that I'm a little wary of is that you're only going to get one activation at the beginning of the end step. So any way you can copy this commando or make multiple triggers go off to get more of these coin counters, I think is going to be absolutely crucial to really set the power level off. I also like how, again, compared to the original version, you're not predicated on the decision making of an opponent. With the original, paying 3 life to keep you from getting a pretty powerful card back to your hand can be a decent, bargaining tool, or something difficult for an opponent. But for example, if an opponent is gaining a bunch of life and there's just no way to really make them care about paying the 3 life, they'll just keep denying you that recursion. Obviously, white and black have plenty of recursion on their own, but I do think I like the new version of Athreos a little bit better. Not to say that the original is weak by any means. By saying one is better, I am not insinuating that the other is simply bad, which it is not, so that is something to keep in mind as we move forward. Next up, we have Purphoros, God of the Forge, and the new Purphoros, Bronze Blooded. The original, for 4 mana, you get a 6/5 indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Purphoros isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, he's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent. And for 2 and a red, you can give creatures you control +1/+0 until end of turn. Now let's check out Purphoros Bronze Blooded. His newest version, for 5, you get a 7/6 indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, he isn't a creature, so the same there. He also has the static ability, other creatures you control have haste. I think this is something crucial to have, especially in mono red. And his new ability, for 2 and a red, you may put a red creature card or an artifact creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the end step. Of the next end step, So, 2 things to really look at here. Both of these commanders are very powerful at what they want to do. They are set up in a way that they want you to run the deck a specific direction. Purphoros, God of the Forge, obviously, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, that trigger is very similar to Impact Tremors. It's pretty much the exact same, except it's dealing 1 damage to each opponent. He wants you to play tokens. Play tokens, play as many creatures as humanly possible, and wipe out your opponents without ever having to attack. That's what the card wants to do. Now, if we look at Purphoros Bronze Blooded, for his basically his sneak attack ability, whatever one is calling it, which is actually very accurate, you're going to want to play humongous creatures. You're going to play big creatures you can cheat out very quickly, creatures with powerful enter the battlefield abilities, creatures that trigger when they attack, since he is giving them haste. I do give him this over the original. Red wants your creatures to have haste. There are a lot of creatures that you want to hit the battlefield, and if they can't attack and get their triggers off as soon as they come in, they will likely die to removal before you can ever get to really set them off. Now, the only downside, sacrificing your creatures at the beginning of the end step. There is a way around this. Conjurer's Closet. If you put it in there, you can actually exile it at the beginning of the end step, so it will exile, come back, and it will not have the sacrifice I guess, tax on it. So something to keep in mind there. Again, both very powerful commanders. I really love the flavor of the new one personally, but again, the original is extremely powerful, so don't discount that at all. The only kind of downside is, like I said, they want you to play a specific way. I mean, God of the Forge says play a bunch of tokens. Bronze Blooded says play the biggest things possible. A lot of builds have included Blightsteel Colossus, Darksteel Colossus, because they're massive creatures with trample. Blightsteel can swing in and knock someone out in one hit. Also, I've seen a lot of the Bronze-Blooded builds centered around dragons. Pretty much every dragon you can think of. So, again, strong commanders, but they just don't offer a lot of variety in the ways you can build around them. Next is a very intriguing one. Thassa, God of the Sea, and Thassa, Deep Dwelling. The original, for 2 and a blue, you get a 5/5 indestructible god as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5. She's not a creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1, and for 1 and a blue, target creature you control can't be blocked. And Thassa, Deep Dwelling, same thing, indestructible as long as your devotion is less than 5. It isn't a creature. She is a 6/5. She does cost 1 more. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 other target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control, and then tap target creature. Similar to Theros, again, both very powerful, but they kind of want you to stay in your lane and build them specifically. Again, not that that's bad. Thassa, God of the Sea, the fact that she's making any target creature you control unblockable for just 1 and a blue is huge. You're going to want to run a lot of creatures that have deal combat damage to a player triggers. That's pretty much exactly what she wants you to do. She's good in multiple decks that want creatures to be unblockable, whether or not you wanted to run her as your commander specifically. I know she is extremely powerful in a Yuriko style build where you want your creatures dealing combat damage, if at all possible, all the time. And Thassa, Deep Dwelling, she's like similar commanders we've seen before with blink effects. At the beginning of your end step, you're going to exile the creature and return it. Basically, a 1 mana cheaper Conjurer's Closet for a 6/5 god. Again, a very powerful ability, but this is primarily focused on creatures that enter the battlefield, which there are a ton of blue creatures with powerful ETB triggers, or even occasionally creatures that leave the battlefield that have certain abilities. It's really hard to say. I don't think one is inherently better than the other. They're just different, and I think that is a really good thing. I love Blink Commanders, so it's nice to see something like this on such a powerful god from this set. Next up, we have Nylea, God of the Hunt, and Nylea, Keen-Eyed. They are both 3 and a green. The original is a 6/6. The new is a 5/6. As long as your devotion to green is less than 5, neither of them are creatures. The original, other creatures you control have trample. You can also pay 3 and a green. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. The new version, creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And for 2 and a green, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. So comparing apples to apples, the fact that all other creatures you control have trample is huge. There are a lot of really big green creatures that ironically do not have trample in Magic. So this is a good way to kind of subvert that. I really like commanders such as this that have these static abilities. I mean, Theros again was an example that all other creatures you control have haste. This is the same thing. Other creatures you control have trample. Green has the biggest creatures in the game, so ensuring that they are rolling over opponents' defenses and still dealing damage is huge. Also, I like the fact, for a rather expensive 3 and a green, you can give it +2/+2, but this can be pretty powerful in a pinch. I mean, if you've ramped enough, you can activate this 2, possibly even 3 times, so dealing an extra 6 damage potentially is not something to scoff at. And Nylea, Keen-Eyed. So she's making your creature spells cost 1 less. So green is going to be ramping, but then she's going to be able to make them cheaper anyway. So this will be able to help you get your bigger creatures out much quicker. So that's, fairly good. I mean, it's nothing to really bat an eye at either. And she's going to help you filter your draws, get you these creatures in your hand. Now, green obviously has a lot of creatures with very powerful effects on their own, so the fact that you can dig with her to try and get these is pretty nice. This is something that we don't really see too often in green. It's nice to see this on an actual commander. I think that's one thing that really has a leg up on in comparison to the original, is that you're going to be able to, again, dig through your deck. And you can activate this as many times as you have mana. It's not limited to her tapping either. So say you pay 2 and a green, the top card is not a creature, put it in the graveyard. Pay it again, oh, okay, now you've got the creature, it goes into your hand. All of this before your actual draw step, or you could do this at the end of an opponent's turn. So this is good for setting up good draws, good creature, I guess synergies, things like that. You're going to obviously want to be running. I think the original is just a good static commander to have. I mean, it says, okay, my creature's going to be able to roll over you, and I can pump them up. The new one says, all right, I'm definitely more of a combo commander. I'm going to help myself dig for these pieces. I'm going to make it much easier to cast them on myself. So I guess, again, two very different commanders. The first one kind of helps you beef up your army, while the second one helps you search for these combo pieces. So similar to what you've been seeing. Very good, both, but very different in their own right. Let's check out Erebos, God of the Dead, and Erebos, Bleak-Hearted. Now, they're both going to be able to be cast for 3 and a black. The original is a 5/7, the new is a 5/6. Both indestructible, as are all the gods. If your devotion to black is less than 5, Erebos isn't a creature. Now, with the original, he has the static ability, your opponents can't gain life. A very black-centric static ability, and one that is extremely powerful. Now, you can also pay 1 in the black, pay 2 life, and you can draw a card with the original. So, very powerful, a lot of really interesting builds that I've seen around this commander. Now, with the new one, the Bleak-Hearted, whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. Now, he also has the 1 in the black to sacrifice another creature, and target creature gets -2/-1. Now, initially when I saw this, I was, kind of just questioning the power level in comparison to the original. But now that I've really sat down and analyzed it, you're getting a sack outlet on a commander, meaning you're not going to have to, that's one less card you're going to have to put in your deck to serve that purpose. Also, he's giving you the same card draw for the 2 life you're paying with the original, but when you're sacrificing a creature, you're also getting, albeit a very minor, but no less effective, targeted removal on your commander. So he actually does quite a bit. He can draw you cards, you can sack creatures to cause death triggers, which black has a ton of them, and you have targeted removal, all for a 4 mana god that can turn into a 5/6 indestructible creature. So extremely powerful. To be fairly honest, between the two, I think I prefer the newest version, though that I haven't played either. But again, not discounting the fact that your opponents can't gain life is not an extremely powerful ability. And again, the fact that I like the new one does not discount the original by any means. I just feel that the combo potential and the ways to build around it are much more varied than the original Erebos, God of the Dead. Next up, we have Heliod, God of the Sun, and Heliod, Sun Crowned. The original, for 3 and a white, you get a 5/6 indestructible god. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, he's not a creature. He does have the static ability. Other creatures you control have vigilance. That's okay. For 2 and 2 white, put a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. Now let's compare to the new version. Devotion is the same. He is a 5/5. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or enchantment you control, or enchantment. And then for 1 and a white, another target creature gains lifelink until end of turn. So obviously we're going to point out the combo that has been discussed with Heliod. There's actually a few. The most notable is probably Walking Ballista. You'll get it out, you'll take off a counter, ping an opponent, give it lifelink so it gets a counter back, and it's just rinse and repeat until you win the game. Yeah, the newest version specifically really wants you to build a specific way. It says, okay, regardless of what cards you put in this deck, we're going to make it so you gain life, you're going to pump up your creatures or enchantments with these 1/1 counters as a result, and then you're just going to start smashing opponents. That's what it wants you to do. With Heliod, God of the Sun, it's less direct. Obviously, playing 4 mana for a 2/1 creature token is not efficient by any means. There are cards where you might be able to get 2 tokens at once. Anointed Procession is one that comes to mind. I feel like he also pairs well with other commanders that care about enchantments, specifically Tuvasa, where she's going to get +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. This does include your enchantment creatures. So this can be beneficial in a build such as that. It's actually a card that's very recommended for a lot of Tuvasa builds. I wouldn't say he's inherently that just mind-blowing on his own. Though admittedly Heliod Suncrown, I guess it does give you a bit more build direction to go with, so I maybe a little bit easier to try and build a deck around. Again, these two are extremely different comparing the original to the new one, so I don't know. I wouldn't say that either is inherently better than the other. Like we've seen with a lot of these commanders, they're all very powerful in their own right. They're just vastly different, and I think this is probably the best example of that. And though not a reprint, we will compare the Gruul gods, Xenagos, god of revels, to the new Klothys, god of destiny. Xenagos, you can pay for 3, a red and a green. Klothys, you can pay for 1, a red and a green. They are both indestructible. Both of them have, as long as your devotion to red and green is less than 7, the god is not a creature. Now, Xenagos is a 6/5 versus a 4/5 in Klothys. Xenagos reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. Very powerful ability, one we have seen go off many times. He is a good commander in his own right, and he's also a very useful tool in a lot of other commander decks. Klothys, one that I was really kind of intrigued by when I first read it, but now that I've kind of sat down and analyzed it, I see the potential behind it. She reads, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile target card from a graveyard. So this can be any graveyard. So if you have an opponent that is doing a lot of graveyard recursion, you can target them. If that was a land card, add a red or a green. Otherwise, you gain 2 life, and Klothys deals 2 damage to each opponent. So you have a commander that is good with graveyard hate, can give you ramp, and can do the same effect as we saw with the original Perforos. It deals 2 damage to each opponent. Now, granted, not as efficiently as that card, but nonetheless, it gives you a lot of variety on this commander. The more I've read it, the more I've looked at it, the more I've really grown to like it, and I'm really happy with the flavor. I'm really happy that they've made something so new specifically for this set. So comparing apples to apples, again, it's really hard to compare these two. Though they're the same color combination, they're vastly different. Xenagos is really focused on pumping up creatures, giving them haste, while Klothys really says, you know, I can do what you need me to do. Exile stuff from graveyards. You can even exile things from your own graveyard. If you have discarded, you need the ramp. If you need life gain, if you know an opponent has a low life total, you can just take them down that extra 2. If attacking them just isn't an option, this is a way to ping them and slowly wear them down without having to do that. So a very interesting way to use red and green. I'm really impressed with it. I'm really happy with it. And I'm excited to see what other gods may be released in the future. And just like that, we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, please give a thumbs up. Leave us a comment down below. Let us know what kind of content you would like to see us do in the future. And subscribe for future videos. We really appreciate the support.